morning everyone. 11th May 2022. See on the first page the important development, the Sedition Law that is being re-examined. So Supreme Court is looking into the question of legality and constitutionality of the Sedition Law. Yesterday we talked about the government Ministry of Home Affairs submitted that will re-examine the sedition provision, section 124A of IPC. But now again Supreme Court is seeking some clarification here. Clarification in terms of what about those at present arrested under sedition law? What about those will be arrested when you will re-examine this section? What about their rights? So you give us some clear-cut timeline. At the same time, whether there can be any protection to those when you are re-examining this law. So whether there can be any protection to those people. So this question has been asked by the CJI here. Okay, we'll see what will be reply by the government here. On left hand side you can see crisis in Sri Lanka. The complete page, the cover page is dedicated there. Okay, so just read the headlines. Okay, because we are having this follow-up economic crisis. Yesterday Prime Minister of Sri Lanka resigned. Okay, so there is the severe crisis going on in Sri Lanka, and we can expect some, let's say, political turmoil, change of the government, change of many, let's say, the economic structures, how, let's say, economy works in the country. Many things will change there. Okay, just read the headlines like China infrastructure projects in focus as crisis worsen. Then India guided by Sri Lankans' interest. So India's stand on this situation. We should understand that UN condemns escalating violence in Sri Lanka. Okay, even cricket stars of Sri Lankan team, so or let's say those cricket players of Sri Lanka, they are criticizing the government. So yes, just read the headlines. Whenever it is important article is there from analysis perspective, we will talk about it. Okay, now come to page number 4. You can see Lukmaan IS advertisement there on page number 4. It's, let's say, two important highlights. One is Sociology Foundation batch by Abhijit Jha sir is going to start on 14th June. Okay, at the same time Sociology optional test series will be starting after prelims examination on 18th June. And also Geography optional test series will be starting on 18th June after prelims examination. Okay, so those who are interested in these optional subjects, so they can contact at Lukmaan IS, they can join this batch. Yes. Now, on page number 6, two important articles. Lead article, control inflation by acting on liquidity. Okay, so he is the expert, C. Rangarajan, former chairman of Economic Advisory Council, former RBI governor. So, although his, let's say, articles are a little bit, having technical aspects also, specific economy related points, some good data can be taken from his articles. But overall, from understanding perspective, he writes very good article. On left hand side, the measuring the change. Okay, so measuring the change, this article is having context of data released from this National Family Health Survey 5. Okay, so how these surveys conducted by different government agencies helps us understand the changes that are happening in the socio-economic conditions of the people. Okay, so in first part, the highlights of that report. In the second part, some limitations also mentioned and the importance of these surveys. Okay, so GS2 paper governance part here. So from that aspect, we will take input. Now, fine, text and context page, it is not that much important. On page number 10, rain lashes Andhra Pradesh coast as Asani move closer. So we are having follow-up on this tropical cyclone Asani originated in Bay of Bengal. So yesterday itself we have found the curve of, or let's say path of this cyclone, how it is moving in the Bay of Bengal, and it is expected that it will not make landfall. Okay, but there will be intense rainfall because of this cyclone in the coastal Andhra Pradesh and Odisha. Yes. See on page number 11, panel wanted changes in sedition law. Which panel we are talking, वो आप नोट में नोट डाउन करके रखिए कि कौन से एक्सपर्ट पैनल ने पहले भी बोला है कि सेडिशन लॉ चेंज होना चाहिए. हम आंसर में लिखेंगे ना, द गवर्नमेंट इज सेइंग दैट विल री एग्जामाइन. तो उस गवर्नमेंट को पता भी है ना, पहले भी एक्सपर्ट कमिटीज ने वो बताया है कि री एग्जामाइन करना चाहिए. ओके, सो विच पैनल वी आर टॉकिंग हियर? द कमिटी फॉर रिफॉर्म्स इन क्रिमिनल लॉज अपॉइंटेड इन 2020. Okay, so it examined section 124A sedition law and other provisions of IPC. Okay, so it let's say recommended the changes in sedition law. Okay, so you can write this in your answer directly. Fine. One more important news on page number 13. European Union says Russia hacked satellite ahead of invasion. So on 24th February, when Russia attacked Ukraine, 24 hours before that attack, Russia had some kind of cyber attack on Ukraine government machinery, business entities, enterprises, as well as some of the other European countries also. And that led to weakened stance of Ukraine. ठीक है, ये strong attack करने के लिए उनको help किया है. So you can give this example when we talk about cyber warfare, cyber security. So how cyber security is important? When it is compromised, then we can say that it weakens the defense of the country, overall defense of the country. So this is a new area of warfare, cyber warfare, and such kind of attacks are very crucial when we talk about, let's say, sovereignty of the country is being attacked. Okay, this example you should keep in mind. Fine. So let us discuss these articles now. First one, control inflation by acting on liquidity. Some concepts are explained in this article. We will talk about that. GS3 paper economy part. Yes, recent increase in repo rate and CRR, cash reserve ratio, by RBI. So it has increased by 40 basis points and this is increased by 50 basis points. This is to deal with inflation. So what is the situation in the country about inflation? Latest data, March month 2022, 6.95% retail inflation in India, and this is expected to again increase in April month. This is not only the situation in India but also other developed countries in the Western world like US. In US in March, this situation was around 8.5%. You can understand the retail inflation or consumer price inflation in US in March 8.5%. So there is overall increase in the inflation around the world, especially after the pandemic, when the world economy was recovering from the impact of pandemic and the recent, we can say, impact of Ukraine-Russia war. Yes, so let us talk about what governments around the world did after pandemic. Pandemic had resulted into lockdowns, stringent lockdowns around the world, and that restricted the movement of goods and people from one place to other place. So it affected trade, international trade. also it affected the trade within the country. So it subdued the economic activities in the country and around the world also. So production of the goods declined in that period. Now the Keynesian economy suggests that when the economic cycle is not working, or let's say there is recession, to bring back it on the growth path, there needs government intervention. And what government can do here is create demand in the economy so that the cycle once again is restarted. Okay, so that's why the governments around the world, including India, they started more and more government expenditure especially on infrastructure projects, and it was expected that that will result into more and more consumption, increase in the wages of the people, and that will fuel the demand. It was expected. Now what is the problem? In India, expansion in government expenditure did not immediately result in increased production in the countries where lockdown was taken seriously, like India, very stringent lockdown, and that affected the supply chain, or we can say the supply chain obstacles were created because of lockdown. Okay, and because of that, what happens is the growth was not in consonance with this expenditure. Okay, so this was not reflected, but slowly it recovered. It started. Okay, so government was taking various measures under Atmanirbhar Bharat package, but whether there was sudden increase in the production levels, or we can say growth, no. In 2021 there was revival, but the growth package was given in 2020 itself, right? So this was very slow process in countries like India where there are supply side constraints. Okay, structural constraints we call them. So this is the situation. Now when there is more and more government expenditure, this means in economy there is more and more government is pouring more and more money in the economy, and this money supply results into, we can say, inflation. Okay, so understanding the issue of inflation, so some important concepts. Yes, there are two causes. We can divide the causes of inflation into two parts. One is demand pull inflation and other is cost push inflation. Okay, so demand pull means what?
When there is more demand by the people of a country, then the price of the product automatically increases.
Yes, when there is more demand for the same product.
And supply is less.
Yes, so yes, goods are limited, but there is more demand for those goods, so its price increases. This is demand pull inflation. What is cost push inflation?
Sir, in cost push inflation, the product which is made is not having much price, but due to the labor cost, the raw material used in this,
Yes,
the price of the labor cost and the price of raw material, they increase and they force the
yes. So it increases the price of the product, manufacturing cost.
Actually, it
Yes.
is the manufacturing cost.
Yes, and that is transferred to ultimately consumer. So that's why the inflation increases. So simply cost push inflation is whatever the inputs that are there, they are costly, raw material or let's say wages. So when there are high wages or high raw material cost, all these contribute to increase in the cost of that manufacturing of that product, and that is passed on to the consumer, and that's why the high prices or simply inflation is there. So there are different reasons for that also. Okay, so at present we can take the example at present is impact of Ukraine and Russia war. So what we are witnessing is high commodity prices or increase in the crude oil, natural gas prices. They act as an input. and that input cost is let's say included in the price of the good, and that's why it is increasing. Okay, so this is the issue of inflation. Now how to deal with this situation? Okay, what government is doing at present, so it can be dealt on two fronts. One is monetary policy, yes, monetary policy, and other is fiscal policy. Okay, but before that let us understand how inflation is impacting growth, then we'll talk about way forward. Okay, so inflation growth trade-off, we know that low levels of inflation are also not good, high levels of inflation are not good for economic growth, rather moderate level of inflation is good. Okay, so when there is very high level of inflation, growth does not happen. Why? Because
less consumption.
Less consumption.
Less
Price of the product is high when there is inflation, because everybody has money to buy that particular thing, and eventually the demand for the particular product increases. So as its cost also increases.
when there is high inflation, there is high cost of credit. When there is high inflation, it is high cost of credit. That means when someone is taking loan or doing borrowing, when there is high inflation, it is more costly to that borrower. We learn this in economic basics. Borrow करने वाला, जो लोन लेने वाला होता है ना, उसको ज़्यादा पे करना पड़ेगा. ठीक है. सो यहाँ पे क्या होगा, इसका कॉस्ट जो है borrowing का कॉस्ट बढ़ेगा. So because of that what will happen, the people or businesses, they do not borrow, and that's why there is no manufacturing or production capacities, expansion of this business, and that's why economic growth subdues. Okay, the major factor here is related to credit creation. Major factor is related to credit creation. Now this is the trade-off. Now other aspect related to economic growth is that whenever the monetary policy stance is related to credit growth.
But inflation is due to the more money supply in the
Yes.
economy, then inflation happens. Then how it is it's related to this cost of credit?
See, when there is high inflation, पहले इन्फ्लेशन नहीं होगा, पहले हम क्रेडिट देंगे या मनी सप्लाई होगा, उसके बाद में इन्फ्लेशन होगा, उसके बाद जो है ये प्रॉब्लम होता है. Okay, so basically see, the value of money depreciate. When there is high inflation, value of money depreciates, and when there is low value of money, its, let's say, buying capacity reduces. Its buying capacity reduces. Simply let me tell you one example. Suppose there is very high inflation. Okay, so what will happen? The investors are not going to get more returns. Investors are not going to get more returns. Let me give you one example. Suppose there is 6% inflation. Suppose there is 6% inflation, and I am investing 1 lakh rupees in, let's say, any equity, okay, in the market, and that is going to give me, suppose, 6% returns. Okay, I am investing, that is going to give me 6% return. Now you tell me, after 1 year, if there is simply 6% inflation is going to persist, after 1 year, what is the value of that investment or returns?
1,600,000.
It is zero, no? Because inflation is same. The value of money is also becoming same.
Okay, sir.
That's why the investors do not invest. That's why the investors do not invest. This is the problem. Now you tell me, when this is 3 and this is 6, now investors will start investing, because they are going to get more returns after 1 year, after 2 years, because they know inflation is less. आर यू गेटिंग दिस? ये बहुत जरूरी होता है. दिस अफेक्ट्स द इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ. ओके, यस. सो नाउ way forward we are talking about monetary policy, and the writer is of the view that largely to deal with inflation, fiscal policy is not that much, we can say, effective. Rather, monetary policy, and that too it should focus on dealing with money supply. It should focus on reducing the money supply. The same case US Federal Reserve, जो सेंट्रल बैंकिंग सिस्टम है यूएस का, यूएस फेड वी कॉल इट एज, सो दैट इज ऑल्सो ट्राइंग टू रिड्यूस मनी सप्लाई इन द यूएस इकोनॉमी टू डील विद दैट लेवल ऑफ इन्फ्लेशन. सो सेंट्रल बैंक्स अराउंड द वर्ल्ड आर फोकसिंग ऑन कॉन्ट्रैक्शनरी मॉनेटरी पॉलिसीज एट प्रेजेंट. कॉन्ट्रैक्शनरी मीन्स sucking out the money from the economy. Okay, and different measures for that purpose, like increasing repo rate, increasing CRR. Okay, so policy rates could जो है बढ़ाना. So because of that there will be reduction in money supply. Other measures can be taken like OMO operations, open market operations. So that will also help in reducing money supply. Okay, so the writer is of the view that such kind of, let's say, high level of inflation, they can be dealt only with this. When we experience high inflation for long time, there comes the major role of fiscal policy, or let's say impact of fiscal policy is long term. Like for example, dealing with structural constraints. Structural constraints. What are structural constraints? For example, labor laws, land laws, land acquisition laws, environmental laws, environmental clearance, tax reforms. Okay, infrastructure. So supply chain management or supply chain improvement, all these are structural. They focus largely on cost push inflation. Okay, so one should understand that any, let's say, high level of inflation is not purely cost push or demand pull. It is combination of both. It is combination of both, and this is how we should understand. Temporarily monetary policy will deal with this situation like this, but the government will have responsibility on these fronts. Okay, government will also temporarily try to provide some relief, for example reducing duties on fuel, crude oil, petroleum products, okay, petrol and diesel. So why it is important? Because it is disproportionate impact on common people or poor people. That's why duties on the fuel can be reduced, but again it impacts the fiscal space of the government. So that's why there is less scope on that front. Rather, long term measures are very important. Okay, fine. So look at this question. Inflation in India cannot be described just as cost push. Okay, with reference to this statement, explain the contemporary inflation growth dynamics in India. Okay, so now you will be able to explain this. Measuring the change, the importance of socio-economic surveys. Recently, the data from National Family Health Survey 5 has been released, and some highlights like there is improvement in the numbers of immunization among the children. At the same time, the institutional births have increased in India. Marginal improvement in the nutritional status of the children. Along with that, anemia prevalence in India has actually increased as compared to last. Anemia, especially among the women, adolescent girls, it is very high in India. That affects, let's say, their health during pregnancy. So this is very high, it has increased. Another positive development is TFR of India has dipped below replacement level of 2.1. total fertility rate. Now, fertility rate among the Muslim community dipped to 2.3 in 2019-20 as compared to previous, let's say, or 5 years ago, 2.6. This is the highest dip among any community in India, religious community. Now, less than a third married women are working and nearly 44% do not have freedom to go to the market alone. From society perspective, we should understand how it is still, we can say, patriarchal nature of society. Less than third of the married women, see, married women we are talking, not let's say unmarried, their participation is significantly higher comparatively, are working, and nearly 44% do not have freedom to go to the market alone. Now this, a little over 80% have said that they can refuse demands for sex from their husband. Now in today's newspaper itself, Delhi High Court is going to give final verdict on this petitions regarding, criminalizing the marital rape. Now this data is very relevant here. Okay, so at the same time we should understand the bodily autonomy of the women or dignity and respect, Article 21, personal liberty we talk about. So yes, this we can say marital rape issue has created some kind of, let's say, questions here. It has raised some questions regarding Indian society, how societal norms in India are, we can say that, impacting women in the society. Okay, so GS1 paper society part, those having sociology optional subject, they can use this data in their answer. Surely marital rape issue in sociology optional subject, there can be direct question, and we can expect in GS1 also such question. Now multiple surveys such as this one, National Family Health Survey, Sample Registration Survey, Census, Labor and Economic Surveys, ways of integration are necessary for insights about a country as vast and complex as India. They help us to understand changes in the socio-economic conditions of the people. At the same time, it helps us understand the status of marginalized community in the society, be it women, children or other minority communities. So their status is understood, and the evidence-based policy making can be undertaken by the government. However, despite of such surveys, the reliability of the data is questioned. We should understand this. Why? Because in the previous National Family Health, let's say, not National Family Health Survey, there was All India Expenditure Survey, Economic Expenditure Survey. In 2017-18, this data was not released. The latest data we have is 2011-12. And now recently government agreed that they will conduct another survey. So basically the reliability needs to be improved. Okay, so in the end, centers should invest more on substantially in improving their reliability. Reliability in sense, the way the data is collected, the way data is stored and released. Okay, all these we can say it helps us to improve the reliability of these surveys. Okay. European Union says Russia hacked satellite ahead of invasion. So this is big news in terms of cyber warfare. Okay, so the cyber attack took place 1 hour before Russia's unprovoked and unjustified invasion of Ukraine on 24th February, thus facilitating military aggression. See, when such kind of cyber attack happens, or let's say directly it is hacking the satellite, that means basically all GPS, GIS facilities the military, yes, they are dependent on all the satellites and we can say cyber systems of the country, and when they are hacked, of course their ability to retaliate such kind of aggression reduces. Okay, so this is the, we can say, modern example of cyber warfare. Up till now we know that cyber warfare, how China is involved in cyber warfare with US and other countries, but here exactly before, let's say, military aggression, such kind of cyber attack was done, and for the first time European Union explicitly accepted this. Okay, so you can use this example in your mains examination GS3 paper, we can say cyber security part. Can sedition accused get protection? Asked Supreme Court. Okay, so yesterday we have seen that government said we will re-examine sedition provision. Okay, Supreme Court indicated willingness to wait, although wondering for how long for the government to re-examine the colonial law of sedition. However, the court asked the government to respond within next 24 hours on how it intended to protect the interest of people already arrested and facing prosecution under this sedition law of IPC. The court further sought the government's response on whether the use of British era law could be suspended in the view of reconsideration process. यहाँ पे सॉलिसिटर जनरल का रिप्लाई देखिए, काफ़ी इंटरेस्टिंग है, और CJI का भी उसके ऊपर रिप्लाई बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग है. So Solicitor General is saying that we are re-examining, we are considering, the process has started and all. We will not let's say give timeline, but whenever there is misuse of sedition law, there are constitutional courts and remedies. This is the view of Solicitor General. Okay, so that means any person who is yes, he can or she can go to court. The CJI is saying that how can every person go to the court? We cannot ask every person to go to the court. Second thing, meanwhile those booked will be jailed for months. So of course these trials will continue, they will go to court, the trials will continue and they will remain in the jail. So again it is impacting their rights. At the same time, we cannot ask each and every individual to go to court. Okay, so on one hand you are having this very what you can say derogatory law or harmful law by the government, and other side you are seeking the redressal using courts. So instead you deal with this. Okay, why you are troubling the people?
Such kind of laws are imposed on those people who don't even know much about the
Of course. Yes, the majority population, we can say, they do not understand the nitty-gritties. There are, bail is denied in general. They remain in the jail for long period of time, and ultimately the conviction rate is very low. Very, very low conviction rate. Ultimately they are released. But again, it is increasing burden on the judiciary also. It is impacting rights of the people, and the government is simply doing nothing.
There are already so many cases pending with the judiciary.
Yes. So of course pending is the main concern, pending of cases. Okay, rain lashes Andhra Pradesh coast as Asani moves closer. So Cyclone Asani originated in Bay of Bengal near Andaman and Nicobar Sea, has shifted along the coast of Andhra Pradesh and Odisha. It is expected to recurve towards northeastern direction. So it will veer off towards the northwest Bengal and Odisha coast without making landfall. This is the situation. Asani is named for the Sinhalese word wrath. So it is given by Sri Lanka, the name. It is likely to rage as cyclonic storm for most of the 11th May, peter out on 12th May according to latest forecast of IMD. Okay? Yes. So it will be revision for you. कुछ भी जो न्यूज़ में होता है वो बार बार आपके माइंड में जब आप डालते हो, उसको रिवाइज करते हो, that goes into your subconscious mind. ओके और वो हमेशा फिर बहुत दिनों बाद याद आता है, ठीक है। बट न्यूज़पेपर में हम इतनी सारी चीज़ें रोज़ पढ़ते हैं, अगर उसको हम रिवाइज नहीं करेंगे तो उसका कोई यूज़ नहीं है। There is no use if we are not revising it. Many times students underline on the newspaper, they invest 2 to 3 hours daily and that goes to Raddiwala. So without making notes or without taking inputs or without revising them, so it is not of use. You are wasting your time and then you resort to PT 365 or something annual editions. ओके सो व्हाट इज द यूज, यू आर डबलिंग योर एफर्ट्स, ठीक है। तो ऐसे नहीं होना चाहिए, आपका टाइम बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट है। ओके यस, एनी क्वेश्चन फ्रॉम योर साइड? फाइन, ओके, लेट अस स्टॉप।